everybody to the fourth, thank you, installment of Lox and Learn. Thank you all for being here nice and bright and early at 8 o'clock this morning, and thank you everybody online. Our speaker today is the famous inimitable, I can't ever pronounce that word, so I probably shouldn't have chosen it, Sandy Winters. She got her BA at Boston University, her MA at Columbia Teachers College, and she wasn't done yet, her Bachelor of Hebrew Letters from Baltimore Hebrew University. She taught Hebrew language and Jewish history at Beth Am Day School for 11 years. She served as ritual director at Bethel for 26 years, but she has graced our presence here at Beth Am for the past 8 years and has been a regular teacher for Torah study and more. So please welcome Sandy Winters. I'm gonna make sure that you can be heard. Here's the microphone right here.
Oh, okay. Can I be heard?
I'll move you closer.
Can they hear you? Can you hear Sandy?
Can someone come off mute and Sandy, just maybe say who you are, say your name.
Okay, I'm Sandy Winters.
Can you hear her?
You're all on mute if you're answering.
Yes.
Here. Thank you.
Okay, very good.
All right.
As you heard, I studied linguistics in graduate school, and I am obsessed with words. Some people like to read novels or history or mysteries. I like to read dictionaries. Those who have communicated with me by email know that my email address is shamash3@comcast.net. Why 3? Because Shamash 1 and Shamash 2 were rejected. Some others probably beat me to it and took Shamash 1 and Shamash 2. Sometimes people ask me what the word Shamash means, and I am more than happy to tell them because I boasted that I was the first female Shamash in Yiddish in Baltimore, serving at Bethel for 26 years. According to the Alkali Hebrew English Dictionary, Shamash means servant or janitor or attendant. In Yiddish literature, translated into English, it is beadle, B-E-A-D-L-E. According to my favorite book, the Unabridged Dictionary, beadle means a parish officer whose duties include ushering and preserving order at church services. As a child, my family belonged to Kuzakamuna right here in this building. We always had a shamus. In the weekly bulletin, he was listed as the sexton, which is defined in the Unabridged Dictionary as the custodian, the person in charge of the building. These are not what the shamash does in the shul. The shamash is in charge of the daily minyan, Torah reading on weekdays, Shabbat, and holidays, and coordinating daveners in shiva houses. That is what I did at Bethel for all those years. However, the idea of shamash as servant is still preserved in the traditions of Hanukkah, as we call the candle which lights the other candles, the shamash or the shamus. We are obsessed with words. We Jews are obsessed with words. Our very close relationship with language, with words, is a direct result of our history as a people. So much has been written and spoken about the remarkable survival of the Jewish people, especially when we are compared with other ancient cultures and or nations. One reason for linking our very close relationship with language is our history. We've lived in many different countries, and acceptance or non-acceptance of Jews has caused us to move around a lot. So of course we picked up words and in many cases, whole chunks of other languages. Yiddish and Ladino are the best examples of this phenomenon. For survival purposes, it was essential to know how to speak and read the language of the country where you were. That had a lot to do with the level of acceptance of the Jews in any one country. Jews in Muslim Spain spoke Arabic. Jews in Baltimore speak English. Another reason is the role of literacy, which leads to universal education. It is clearly what sustained the Jews. In other words, in order to be a Jew, you had to know how to read. The Talmud, compiled in the first millennium of the Common Era, clearly states that it is a father's obligation to educate his sons. Sorry, ladies. When the Second Temple in Jerusalem was destroyed and the Jews were sent into exile, what did they take with them? Their books. No matter what language we use in everyday life, we still use Hebrew and Yiddish words in the rituals of the synagogue and in the life cycle rituals. For example, we use the Hebrew words bima, musaf, and sidur. We use the Yiddish words yortzeit, afruf, and yarmulke. So I will begin with a brief vocabulary list to introduce my talk. You have on your table
Handouts.
some words.
And everybody online, this is the source sheet that I sent out in yesterday's email.
Right. It begins with the word charity, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Charity is defined as the act of giving money, goods, or time to the unfortunate. It is also defined as voluntary. Lady Bountiful. Anybody heard that expression, Lady Bountiful?
Mhm.
Lady Bountiful is an expression based on a character in an 18th century play in French and later translated into English. It is used to describe a wealthy woman, usually the wife of the lord of the manor. She helps the poor tenants of the manor, and her acts of generosity are praised, clearly because they are voluntary. In other words, she could stay in the manor house and embroider and play cards all day.
There's nothing wrong with embroidery.
Well,
Nothing wrong with embroidery.
no, nothing wrong with embroidery. Tzedakah, which is a religious obligation. Tzedakah literally means righteousness. In modern Hebrew, we say, "Ata tzodek," you are right. The contrast between the two is brought out in a recent article in the foreword, comparing the different financing methods of churches and synagogues, even though both appear to raise the same amount of money per member. Synagogues charge dues, churches do not. Again, obligatory versus voluntary. The next one, Me'ot Chitim, is a fund collecting monetary contributions to provide matzah and other Passover foods to poor families. In Baltimore, this is done through synagogues and also through the Associated. Number 5, Gabbai. Many of you are familiar with the term Gabbai, plural Gabbayim. This is the word for those who stand alongside of the Torah reader. We do this at Beth Am. The stated purpose of the Gabbayim is to follow the Torah reader from a printed copy of the text with vowels in order to correct the reader when necessary. But the meaning of the word Gabbai is tax collector. Let's return to several centuries ago, when a major way of financial maintaining of the synagogue was expecting those who were honored with a Torah aliyah to give a monetary contribution. They obviously couldn't give it on Shabbat. So the Gabai's job was to collect on the weekday following Shabbat. But he had to remember who had an Aliyah. And so that was the reason that the Gabai stood at the reading table. Gabai is an Aramaic word. Is that the last?
We have a two-sided. Do you need the other side?
Oh, no, I
Oh.
don't need this. Okay, I wasn't sure. Okay. There is a legend or see, I'm missing my word. There is a legend or an anecdote on Me'ot Chitim, the fund for providing Passover necessities for those who are needy. Apparently, in the days of the shtetl, the money was collected in a central place, and in order to return it to the participants, that is to the poor, they actually would go out and buy with the money. They would go out and buy matzah and wine and other necessities for Passover and place them on the doorstep. Whose doorstep did they place them on? Whoever did not contribute.
Oh.
Whoever did not contribute. That was a way of shaming the people who did not contribute, because if the legend goes, if a wealthy family did not contribute money to the Me'ot Chitim, they would wake up on the morning before Passover and they would find on their doorstep a bottle of wine, a box of matzah, and other necessities for Passover. So much for Me'ot Chitim. I don't know, perhaps some of you can enlighten me as to how this is done at Beth Am. Do we do this at Beth Am?
Oh, you mean like buy Passover goods for?
No, collect money for the Me'ot Chitim fund. Or is it done through the Associated? It's done through the Associated here. In some synagogues in Baltimore, when you come to the synagogue to sell your chametz, which is a common practice, you leave some money for Me'ot Chitim. Different synagogues do it different ways.
But
Okay.
don't they have made the matzah? Why did they have to buy it?
Pardon that?
Every shtetl would have a baker that would make the matzah. Like the idea of buying it is.
Well, they would buy it from the baker.
Right, it was very localized.
Yes, it was very localized, and they would buy it from the baker. I mean, this is an anecdote, and its veracity is questionable, but it gives you the idea. And the idea is that everyone participates, and we will see that idea in time as well.
Oh, is this where they need the?
No.
Oh, okay.
I'd like to continue with an anecdote from my first year of college at Boston University. This was 65 years ago. And I was away from home for the first time, and I gravitated toward Hillel to find other Jewish students and also programs that would interest me. One of the first programs that I attended was a debate between the rabbi from Hillel and the priest from the Newman Club. The Newman Club is the campus organization for Catholic students. It's their Hillel. The topic was conversion.
Wow.
Both the rabbi and the priest had experiences of students coming to them with an interest in converting. In the case of the priest, to converting to Catholicism, and of course in the Hillel, the converting to Judaism. And so the priest began. The priest said, there are two kinds of potential converts. The first one is a group of young people who come to me and say, Father, I have been studying philosophy. I have met with a lot of students. I have thought about my upbringing, in some cases a religious upbringing, or in some cases an absence of religious upbringing. I've taken some philosophy courses, and I've done a lot of thinking and a lot of reading, and I believe that I would like to convert to Catholicism. The second group is a group of young people who say, I am planning to marry a Catholic, and a Catholic young man or young woman, and I am planning to convert to Catholicism. I was not brought up as a Catholic, and I would like to convert to Catholicism. And so, will you help me, Father? Those are the two diametrically different reasons for conversion. The priest says, the first group I welcome, those who are thinking and really looking at their upbringing and so forth. And I believe that they're very sincere, although they have a lot to learn. I welcome them. I'm a little bit more skeptical of those who are converting in order to marry a Catholic, because it may be just pressure from the family, a desire to appease the family of the young person who was brought up Catholic. So, although I welcome both, I'm more skeptical about the one who wants to convert in order to become Catholic, in order to appease perhaps the parents or the rest of the family of that young person. Then the rabbi gets up and says exactly the opposite. We Jews are very contentious, and the rabbi said exactly the opposite. He said, yes, there are young people who come to me and say, Rabbi, I've tried to learn a little bit about other religions other than the one I grew up in, or perhaps they say, I've been thinking, I've been taking courses in philosophy, and I've talked to my fellow students who are Jewish, and I think I would like to convert to Judaism. He said, that's fine. And he works with those young people, but he's skeptical about them. You've heard the expression sophomoric and sophomoric, the idea that young people come from perhaps a sheltered background and are exposed in university to many ideas. And he said, perhaps they're sincere and perhaps it's the flavor of the week. However, I see you just try, I see you shaking your head in agreement, right, Esther?
Right, as
Okay.
convert, yeah.
I didn't mean to point you out.
It's
but,
it's
yeah.
hard.
On the other hand, those who are going into this because of the family of the young person who is encouraging them to convert to Judaism, or the Jewish spouse or potential spouse. And so I know that they are joining a group, they are joining a people, they are joining into a family. And I recognize that some of these conversions are not necessarily as sincere as I would like them. But what I came away from this program was that Christianity, or Catholicism in particular, or as well, emphasizes the individual and the relationship with Jesus. Judaism, there's an emphasis on community. And as a result, the priest and the rabbi had diametrically opposed concepts of what to do. We'll take a little break here, and I invite you to take a chumash. There's
In the back,
Yeah,
the eighth time. Yeah.
Mhm. I invite you all to take a chumash.
What are the, oh, yeah.
And those of you at home, if you have an Eitz Chaim chumash, the page numbers will be there. If you have another one, I will give you the the citation so that you can follow along as well.
And they have the pages.
We're also going to read it.
No, yeah, were those included in the PDF?
No,
They work from the digital.
pardon?
Thank you.
I copied them for the people online.
Oh,
Great.
okay, thank you.
Great, thank you.
Okay. All righty. Before we get to the, just a minute. Before we get to the texts, I want to introduce the first text by talking about the word shekalim, or shekel. Shekel is the singular, shekalim is the plural. The word shekel means weight, W-E-I-G-H-T. And it's the way that money was designated from ancient times. Think of, for example, the British pound. It is the name for the currency used in Israel. It's an interesting coincidence that the verses that we are about to read are the special maftir that is read in the synagogue this coming Shabbat. This coming Shabbat is the first of 4 special Shabbatot preceding Pesach, and its purpose is to remind us of the obligatory nature of supporting the synagogue financially. An interesting use of the word weight loss, excuse me, an interesting use of the word is in the weight loss program in Israel called Shomrei Mishkal. The root of Shomrei is Shomer, which is to guard or keep watch, as in the expression Shomer Shabbat. Mishkal contains the root shekel. So Shomrei Mishkal is the Israeli version of Weight Watchers. I invite you now to turn to page 523. Page 523 in the Eitz Chaim Chumash that you have in front of you. Page 523. This is Exodus 30, verses 12 through 16. Do I have a volunteer to read? Go ahead. Yes? Oh, wait a minute. Where's my Chumash?
Oh, here.
Sorry. Oops. Don't worry, I know it by heart. Wait a second. Wait a second. Just a minute. Got 23. I'm sorry.
The wrong page.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's not the wrong page. I had the wrong page. Okay. Would you start over again, sir? I'm sorry.
I know it by heart because it was my bar mitzvah.
Oh, you know it?
Oh, my
Okay, you know
God.
it. That was your bar mitzvah portion. What a coincidence.
It didn't make sense to me then, and it doesn't make sense. Here are these people in the middle of the desert.
Okay, well,
They're
we'll,
getting,
let's read it.
and
Let's read it in English and we'll talk about it. Okay?
Lord's supposed to say, when you take the census of the Israelite people according to their enrollment, each shall pay the Lord a ransom for himself when being enrolled, that no plague may come upon them through their being enrolled.
Keep going.
This is what everyone who is entered in the record shall pay: a half shekel of the sanctuary weight, 20 gerahs to the shekel, a half shekel as an offering to the Lord. Everyone who is entered in the records from the age of 20 years up shall give the Lord's offering. The rich shall not pay more, and the poor shall not pay less than half a shekel when giving the Lord's offering as expiation for their person. You shall take the expiation money from the Israelites and assign it to the service of the tent of meeting, which shall serve the Israelites as a reminder before the Lord as expiation for your person.
Okay. We will leave aside the question of where did they get shekels being in the wilderness. However, the principles here are informative. Everyone with certain restrictions of age and gender, all must participate. This is a group activity and all participate equally. The two important principles of Tzedakah are here clearly stated. It's obligatory and all participate. Its purpose was to support the tabernacle in the wilderness, the details of which are described in painful detail in the previous parshiot. I had a dear friend who was a part-time cantor and a part-time architectural draftsman. He used to say of the two previous parshiot, Teruma and Tetzavel, that these were texts that only an architect could love. But aside from the details was the idea that all participate equally, an expression of the concept that everyone has an equal responsibility to participate in meeting the community's needs. The counting also facilitated a census, as it was important as a community to know how many people there were. I draw your attention to the commentary on page 524 in the Eitz Chaim Chumash. It's at the bottom of the page, and it starts with the letter E in parenthesis. Everybody got it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. In the early 20th century, the Zionist movement revived the custom of contributing a shekel to establish membership in a Zionist organization as a way of measuring how many people could be counted upon to support it. And they used the word shekel, or they revived the word shekel. Of course, those of you who have been to Israel know that that is the currency. And as many times as it has been as it has been reevaluated, we still use the word shekel. I understand that I haven't been to Israel in a long time, but I understand that they now call it the new shekel, right? Okay. Do they actually use the word
When officially it's NIS, New Israeli shekel.
Right, okay.
Officially.
But do people use the word shekel or the new shekel, or do they just say shekel? Right, yeah, that's what I thought. Okay.
But it's being devalued right now. The dollar's going.
Okay. The second text is called Peah, and you will find it on page 727 in the Eitz Chaim Chumash. It is Leviticus chapter 23, verse 22. Page 727. Oh, got it.
The Lord
Verse
spoke to Moses.
22.
Oh, 22?
Verse 22 on page 727. This is chapter 23 of Leviticus, verse 22. Do I have a reader?
And when you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap all the way to the edges of your field or gather the gleanings of your harvest. You shall leave them for the poor and the stranger. I am the Lord your God.
Okay. The definition of gleanings is what falls onto the ground without being picked. The word peah, which is used here, means corners. You may be familiar with the plural peot or payas in Yiddish, referring to the leaving of the corners of the hair on the head, a practice which is still common in the Hasidic communities to this day. The law of peah or gleaning, as it is known in English and described here, is made famous by the book of Ruth, where Ruth, being impoverished, takes advantage of this law by gleaning in the corners of the field of Boaz. And we all know what happens next after that. It's a way of preserving the dignity of the poor by having them actually do the work of gathering the ripe crop. The context here is an agricultural society. It's important to understand that ancient Israel was an agricultural society. And so much of the text that we don't understand and don't relate to well is because the sacrificing of animals, something like this, as a means of charity, the corners of leaving the corners of the field are things we don't relate to as much because we get our food from the supermarket. But it is a way of preserving, in this case, of preserving the dignity of the poor. The next text that we're going to read is found on page 1076. Page 1076. And for those of you that are at home that perhaps have a different Chumash, it's Deuteronomy 14, verse 27. Deuteronomy 14, verse 27. 1076.
1076.
Very good.
But do not neglect.
Okay, do I have a reader? Page 1076, Deuteronomy chapter 14, beginning with verse 27.
But do not neglect the Levite in your community, for he has no hereditary portion as you have.
Keep going.
Oh. Every third year you shall bring out the full tithe of your yield of that year, but leave it within your settlements. Then the Levite who has no hereditary portion as you have, and the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow in your settlements shall come and eat their fill.
so that the Lord your God may bless you in all the enterprises you undertake.
Remember, and it mentions at the beginning that the Levite has no hereditary portion. Back in Parshat Korach, we learn that no land is assigned to the Levites. They're too busy in their jobs in the Beit HaMikdash in order to till the fields. So they receive the tithes from the land of the other tribes, and the Kohanim eat of the meat of the sacrifices. These verses reinforce the idea that this obligation is upon all Israel, except, of course, the Levites and the Kohanim. The Kohanim, by the way, were of the tribe of Levi. These verses reinforce the obligation by reminding the people of this obligation. So we not only give the tithe, that is the what shall we call it, the tax, so to speak, of the which is 10%, by the way, to the not only to the Levites and to the Kohanim, but also to excuse me, the fatherless, the stranger, and the widow in your settlements. In other places in the text, the idea of helping the stranger is accompanied by the verse, remember that you were strangers in the land of Egypt. Okay. The last one is right on the next page, page 1077, and it's Deuteronomy 15, verses 7 and 8. It continues on page 1078. Page 1077, verse 7. Do I have a reader?
I will.
Go ahead.
If, however, there is a needy person among you, one of your kinsmen in any of your settlements in the land that the Lord your God is giving you, do not harden your heart and shut your hand against your needy kinsman. Rather, you must open your hand and lend him sufficient for whatever he needs.
Lending money to the poor, remission of loans was an important part of Tzedakah. Again, in an agricultural society, crop failures and animal diseases can result in the presence of poor and needy among the Israelites. Later, there are more complicated, in the Talmud, there are more complicated laws regarding the lending of money and so forth. But we won't go into those now, but the idea of lending money willingly is an important one. Okay. At the bottom of the sheet that you got is a quotation from Yoreh Deah. We're finished with the Chumash. Okay, everybody got it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The quote from Yoreh Deah actually refers to a responsa by the way, Yoreh Deah is part of the Shulchan Aruch, which is a compilation of Jewish law. So the quote that you see from Yoreh Deah, would somebody like to read the quote from Yoreh Deah that's on your source sheet? Go ahead,
He
Rabbi.
makes gifts to his father, whom he cannot support otherwise than out of funds intended for tzedakah. All such contributions are deemed tzedakah.
It was common in medieval Europe and 17th and 18th centuries for people for Jews to write to a sage or a rabbi if there was none in their direct community. And what they would do is expect a response, and these were called responsa. The quote from Yoreh Deah actually refers to a responsa to an inquiry from a Jew whose elderly father can no longer support himself. The son takes the father into his home and provides for all of his needs. The son's question to the sage is the following: can he take the expenses incurred from supporting his father to partially fulfill his obligation to tzedakah? You can see that this Jew takes very seriously the obligatory nature of his contributions to tzedakah. The rabbinic answer, of course, is that he can partially fulfill his obligation to tzedakah with these expenses. The last text that we're going to look at today is the ladder of tzedakah. The ladder of tzedakah.
You have it?
Maimonides. No, I don't have
There
it.
you go.
I have it, but I can't put my finger on it right now. Okay. Everybody got it? The Jewish ideals of tzedakah were taught by Maimonides, our greatest rabbi and leader of 800 years ago. Tzedakah, said Maimonides, is like a ladder. It has 8 steps, from low to high, from worst to best. Here we give Maimonides 8 degrees of tzedakah. Every Jew should decide which step of the ladder he or she stands on and how he or she can best move upward to another step. Number 1, the lowest step in giving tzedakah is to give too little and as if forced to give. The next step, though, is giving too little, to do so pleasantly and cheerfully, as if happy to give. The third step is to give as much as is needed, but only after being asked for it. The fourth step is to give as much as is needed and to do so before being asked. A fifth and higher step than all these is to give enough and to give before being asked, and to give in such a way that the poor person knows who gives him help, but the helper does not know who the poor person is. And remember what's in parenthesis. Remember that this was written 800 years ago. For instance, some of our sages would tie money in the corner of a cloth and toss it over their shoulder as they walked, so that a poor man behind them could pick it up without being recognized. Number 6. Sixth on the ladder of tzedakah is to give enough and before being asked, but in such a way that the giver knows who gets the charity, but the receiver does not know who has given it to him. Again, remember that this text is quite old. For instance, many great sages used to toss money into the doorway of a poor family as they passed along the streets. 7. The seventh and next to the highest way to give tzedakah is to do it so that neither the giver nor the receiver knows the other. For instance, through the secret tzedakah room in the temple and in the synagogues, again, that's sort of stretching the imagination, or by leaving money on tombstones of famous men, or by giving to a general welfare fund that is managed by trustworthy and efficient trustees. Finally, at number 8, at the very top of the tzedakah ladder is the step of helping a needy person by lending him money to open a business, or joining him in a partnership, or finding him a job so that he can support himself and not need charity. Although giving of tzedakah is obligatory, There are many ways of fulfilling this obligation, as enumerated in this text. They range from giving too little or grudgingly to giving anonymously to the highest level, that is, taking steps to help the needy person to provide for himself. There is a Yiddish expression, which I will relate in English. Give a poor man a fish to eat fulfills a level of tzedakah. A higher level is to teach him how to fish. My notes, which tell me that this is a Yiddish expression. However, further research tells me that there's a saying from a Chinese philosopher named Lao Tzu, the founder of Taoism. And it goes like this. Give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. Teach him how to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. Questions, comments? Yes, Esther.
So looking at this at the ladder of Tzedakah with a modern eye, so I mean, I've been working since I was 18.
Can he,
Sorry, yeah. I'll project.
Okay.
Read to the rafters.
Right.
So looking at this with a modern eye, I've been working since I was 18, and I can tell you, like, you can work, but even one job, sometimes even 2 or 3, isn't enough to pull you out of poverty. That's why we now have the phrase "the working poor," which might have been unintelligible. So because Tzedakah takes as its lens the well-being of the entire society rather than just the well-being of the individual, I would like to propose maybe a 9th step of the ladder of Tzedakah, where it's promoting the self-sufficiency of working people and their interests as a class through labor organizing, through stronger protections for laborers, like the railroad workers who strike, which is critical, and we're seeing the effects of that now. But I wanted to put that out there as a little suggestion, because the power of individual workers is not enough to protect them.
Okay, you've updated Maimonides. Remember that he's from 800 years ago. Right, exactly. Ilan?
I'm struck by the idea that Maimonides says that we should give enough, or to give as much as is needed. And I'm struck by the idea that often the people who are doing the asking ask for the bare minimum that is needed. And I think as a donor, it is often helpful to give more than is needed. And I'm a little bit surprised that he doesn't offer that as an option for people.
Would you just repeat that? I sort of lost it somewhere on the way.
Maria, people get off next week. Go ahead.
No, please do.
Would you mind standing up, actually? Thank you, because then.
He says that people should give enough, or as much as is needed. But I'm struck by the idea that sometimes we need to give more than what is needed. And it assumes that the people who are asking for money are saying the amount for everything that would be helpful. But if you're just asking for enough money to pay your electricity bill and your food bill, what about the dignity of being able to have other nice things? I'm surprised he doesn't have a above minimum dues category.
But you're also not supposed to give so much that then you yourself need help.
But there's a big difference between those two. You're right. We should not impoverish ourselves, but what is enough? He doesn't entirely specify.
So something relates to this, and it also talks about what would be.
Could you speak up?
Can you speak up?
Sorry, I'm not a rabbi, so I can't speak. Tzedakah doesn't necessarily mean money. And the idea that you would make a contribution to someone, to people in need without knowing who they are, and giving them that benefit of self-worth, but also not know who gave it to them. When my mom and me did this, you didn't have the capacity of doing that in anything other than a monetary way. I donate blood every 2 weeks. I do platelets, and that's used for cancer. That's used for a lot of things. I don't know who receives it. I know somebody has a need that's described. I don't know who they are. They have no way of separating my red cells out and say, that's Jim's. No, I don't give them candy, nothing. They just don't know it's mine. But I know that when my wife was sick, she had 7 transfusions. If I understand the concept that I could not have taken care of those 7 transfusions. But since then, I do that because I make my own contributions. That's something that I see as a mitzvah.
Absolutely. The idea, the ideas that are contained here, remember, are from 800 years ago.
Oh, yeah, it cut you there.
Right, exactly, exactly. Certainly the idea of tzedakah that you propose or that you suggest in giving blood is something that Maimonides, well, even though he was a doctor, would perhaps not have thought of. But tzedakah is a very I'm losing a word. Pardon?
Very personal.
Right, yeah, of course. Tzedakah is very complicated, as I hope you've learned here today. And Maimonides, of course, is speaking for his time. Yeah, Anna?
Hi. One thing I used to think about when my children were little is, you're not supposed to get a lot of credit. You're not supposed to stand up and say, hey, I just sent a check to whatever it is. But then I would sit there writing the check and I'd say, how do I teach my children that this is what I'm doing? So it's complicated. That's very complicated.
I don't see any reason not to share that with your children.
Here's another comment.
Yeah, go ahead.
When our children were smaller, Lisa and I decided that we would teach them, and so we put part of their allowance into a tzedakah pot. Every week we would sit with all of the fundraising appeals that come in the mail, and we would decide which ones we should give money to. It seemed like a good idea at the time. It might have taught them something, but it has resulted in putting us in a lot of direct mail lists. Still. But that was our idea of how to do that.
It's a very good idea. It's a very good idea. Yeah.
So I'm wondering also how Maimonides is dealing with the interpersonal nature of tzedakah in terms of humility and all people being in the Tselem Elohim, in the image of God, that there is not just the power relation of money, but then there's the power relation of who deserves my money and the issue of ownership. And I think that there is a Catholic thinker who could help us here named Yoreh Deah, who argued that there's no such thing as a deserving poor, that for her, we are not in a position to decide who gets our charity, but that we're all uplifted by the act itself. But then we start doing that calculus, if it's too much or too little, and maybe they will not be able to raise themselves up if I give them too much. Her argument is, we are not in that position to decide that simply because we have more money. And that money and technological advancement should not be conflated with moral advancement. That somehow because you're rich doesn't make you better. And so I'm trying to figure out how Maimonides would operate within that context, because it's not just tzedakah, then it moves into chesed, or into loving kindness. It's interpersonal as much as it is.
Chesed, I think, is different from tzedakah.
No, I'm saying moving,
right,
in terms of the midot.
Esther?
What you said, something that I've seen a lot of people do, especially with regarding like homeless people, is like, I hear a lot of people say like, oh, you shouldn't give them cash. And then they'll say something horrible like, oh, like they'll just use it for drugs or whatever. What you should do, and what I've seen people do is giving out cans of food. And that kind of turns my stomach, because you don't know what that person has access to. So if you think about it for a second, does this person even have a can? Right? A lot of homeless shelters, most homeless shelters don't give people the capacity to cook or heat or prepare food. You know, they may have one of those like camp stoves, maybe, but they don't let you have that if you live in a shelter. Like, do they even have the capacity to use the canned food you've given them? So if they don't, really what it feels like, it feels degrading, you know? You know, just because you have like money and a place to live and a place to prepare food, you get to decide how another person can best use like your tzedakah, basically.
It's like offering judgment as opposed to
Exactly. It's meant to
offering.
it's all like,
Yeah.
I react.
We have time for one. Oh, yeah.
I think in what Ben has said, sort of speaks to an evolution of tzedakah as this sort of requirement and taxation to something that comes from the heart. And to me, it's the chesed is in some ways a necessary condition for tzedakah to be
As opposed to
genuine and intelligent in a lot of ways, as opposed to an automatic requirement. And I think over time, it's taken on, for people who've thought about it and cultivated their practice of tzedakah, many people do get to that point.
Okay, thank you. Last question. Sorry, is that David? Yeah.
Unfortunately, in our society, and I've been told many times, don't give money to people begging you on the street. They're just going to buy drugs. And so, as you've heard, some people have adopted a practice of saying, I'll give you some food, or I'll take you to a fast food place. I just feel that's a situation that Maimonides wouldn't have known about.
No, of course not.
Sure.
So it's just a commentary on our time.
Yeah.
He's talking for his time.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.